Local programming on KRWG made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to Fronteras, A Changing America. I'm Monica Ortiz Uribe. Water is a precious resource, especially here in New Mexico. We've all read about, and I've certainly reported on, the impacts of drought in this region. This summer, I went to the town of Magdalena, which ran out of water when their well went out. That's where I met today's guest, Joe Savage. He was in Magdalena to help them troubleshoot their situation. Now Joe is the Water Resource Coordinator for the state of New Mexico. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you.
So tell us about your job and what you do and how it relates to water.
My job is entirely water. What I do is attempt to bring communities together to look at solutions to their water problems. And pretty much every community in the state has some kind of water problem right now, or water issue, in that there's dwindling aquifers, there's less surface water, so everyone needs to think about sustainability. And that's kind of where I come in, just trying to bring communities together to start the dialogue at least.
Well, give us the assessment of where New Mexico stands with its water supply right now after all these years of drought.
Yeah, I think quite a few aquifers are becoming depleted, as we've seen in like Magdalena, where they had been doing fine for years, and all of a sudden their well they thought went dry, but they had just had the well at such a depth that the water level went below the pump. So it recharged a little bit, which helped them and helped us get them through the situation. But I think everybody really needs to realize that aquifers are depleting. In other words, due to the drought and due to consumption of the aquifers, it's just not being recharged at the rate that we need to sustain at current conditions. So we need to kind of rethink how we're using water in the state.
So you've witnessed these water crises in towns all across the state, right? And traveling to visit these towns. Can you share some stories?
Well, they weren't all crises, fortunately.
Okay.
Magdalena was, because they just ran out of water. And there are a few other communities who either did run out or came really close. In Magdalena, we were pretty lucky. We found them water fairly quickly because they had some old wells that weren't in use that we could rejuvenate and bring into use fairly quickly.
So explain, I mean, how did Magdalena get its water when it encountered that problem, and how has their situation changed?
It's changed only temporarily, I think.
Because where were they getting their water from?
From the aquifer in the basin below, and water was...
Which is underground. It's water that's underground, and then they have a pipe that goes down into it.
They have a pipe and a pump, and that's the well. And they had a fairly large well that had been running about 200 gallons per minute for years, and they depended on this one well. They had two additional wells that they had taken offline in years past for one reason or another. And fortunately, we could take those other two wells, rejuvenate them, put a pump in them, and get them going while the first well was corrected. So that was a fairly straightforward solution for them. However, they still need to realize now they have 3 straws essentially into the same glass of water. So, you know, even though they're 3 different wells, it's the same aquifer, the same groundwater source, so they really need to rethink how they use their water.
So what have been the state's recommendations, the Environment Department?
Yeah, we have a number of programs going. The first is we reached out to each community that only has one source of water, either one well or one spring or something like that, just to alert them. It's like, hey, you may have a problem here, and get back with us and let us know if you see problems like decreases in production from their wells or their spring, or if like turbidity or minerals have increased in their water, things like that. That would indicate that the aquifer is either playing out or becoming lower at least.
How many towns and communities are we talking about statewide?
I think everybody needs to be concerned. However, there are certain areas that seem to be affected now, and I think maybe other areas may not be affected if we plan now and just try to work on solutions. There are some areas like Guadalupe County or Mora County where they're having some problems there, where decreased production or springs have gone dry or going dry and things like that.
So a lot of us did get to hear about Magdalena's situation over the summer. What other towns have you visited since then that experienced similar situations?
Well, the very recent one is Vaughn, and connected to Vaughn is Duran and Encino, two other communities. They're spread out, but the pipes run to those communities just because there's either no water or the groundwater is not of a quality that's really conducive to drinking. So Vaughn really supplies 3 communities in that area with water, and they went dry, but really this was due to another problem that's occurring statewide, and that's just failing or just old antiquated infrastructure. You know, the pipes have been in the ground for, well, since the 50s in some cases, and communities really haven't had the funding to replace them as they needed.
How does it work, right? If I'm the mayor of a small town and all of a sudden I have leaky water pipes, what do I do? What's my situation?
Well, we have another program where we're trying to plan ahead so that no one is just broadsided. They wake up in the morning to phone calls of just residents without water and that sort of thing. So we want to send out the message just to alert everybody. But if that does happen, we have several programs too that we could assist communities in trying to help them through their problem.
And why is it so difficult for a small town to resolve or finance?
Well, that's just it. Excuse me. So a lot of it is the financing, because big communities like Las Cruces, who does really well. I mean, they have a good conservation program going. They have a number of wells, and they have the resources, the human resources and the financial resources, really just to maintain their system and to keep it up. But smaller communities, rural communities, ones that are remote, you know, they may have a population of a few hundred people, and they pay their water bills, but it's really not enough. You know, they can't afford to charge for water what it would take to replace all their infrastructure. You know, they just couldn't afford it. They don't have the population base to really support that infrastructure. So those are the communities that we're really reaching out to at this point.
And Governor Martinezz made a proposal this week that would address this very subject, right? Can you tell us what you know about
Sure.
that proposal?
Yeah, she's proposing to the legislature to use $112 million for just exactly what we're talking about, to help these very small communities that can't afford it to really just boost their infrastructure, to replace leaking pipes, perhaps look for new sources of water, and other things like regionalization, which right through here, there is, what is it called, the Lower Rio Grande Water Authority. And that was, I believe it's 5 water systems, separate communities that all joined together to form one, and they're strength in numbers, because then they have a bigger population base, bigger income, and human resources too, because operators, you know, the water operators, you know, can collaborate, and so it's working very well here. And we're trying to promote that statewide too.
So is it very expensive to replace this infrastructure?
Oh, it could be, you know. We estimated that between the water and wastewater, it could be $1 billion to bring it up, you know, statewide. But that's like the overall picture, you know, not everyone could do that at once. No one has the money for that. So we're going to prioritize and just see which systems really need the money most and help those first.
So give me a sense of just how much water we stand to lose due to faulty infrastructure.
Well, statewide, there's an average, and this is kind of a rough average, but we figure a little over 20% loss average in the community water systems in the state. So that means for every 10 gallons pumped out of the ground, only 8 are going to get to be used, and the rest just goes out through leaks or something like that.
Out of 10 gallons, how much are?
Well, out of 10 gallons, the average is 8 that really gets to be used, and the other 2. And that doesn't seem like much, but really it adds up. And there are some water systems just due to aging infrastructure are at 70% water loss. And then others that do very well, like La Luz, New Mexico, over in Otero County has about 2%. You know, they have a very tight system. You know, and that's what we encourage. And so we're trying to look at water systems and see what they can do to just improve their production and
so I mean, this
reduce their
sounds
water loss.
like whether or not we're in a drought, this is an issue that's going to affect our water supply.
Yeah, I think so. With more people moving in, more industries moving in, and we want to promote jobs and economic growth, of course, but so much of that depends on water. And so we really need to think how we do this. But, you know, I think 10 years ago, 20%, excuse me, 20% water loss was just something people lived with. You know, they could afford to do that because they had the water. You know, but now that it is a drought situation, that 20% is too much. Mm-hmm. So we're really needing to focus on that and help these communities that have the excessive water loss to reduce that. And part of it's leaks, but part of it is just how they move water too, you know. So maybe some that are manually controlled, in other words, where a water operator has to go out and turn on and off the well every time, and things like that. Then tanks overflow, you waste water that way, or the tanks get too low, you know, and it just creates all these situations that could be alleviated just through management practices. And so we're going to help communities with that too.
Well, take me to one of these meetings that you've been to in one of these towns when you first arrive, right? And they've been in this situation where either their water supply is out or near out. Give me a sense of what people's situation is. What are their concerns? How their daily lives have changed?
I think it changes quite a bit, especially in some of the smaller rural communities, because a lot of towns are more agrarian in their way of living, so they're very connected to the land. And even though they're in a town like Magdalena or Chacon that ran out of water, these people have big gardens because that's how they live. They have livestock in town, you know, their goats, their sheep, horses, cattle, you know, and this is part of the way they live. So all of these things need water, of course. And so when they run out of water, it's more than just not having water to make coffee with, you know, or flush a toilet, but it just changes their whole way of life.
It changes what now?
It could change their whole way of life if they don't have that water back. Temporarily, you know, we could work with them and work around it, you know, truck water in, non-potable water for livestock and gardens, and potable water for drinking and that sort of thing, as we look for solutions, you know, longer term solutions for these communities. But it does affect them directly starting day one when they're out of water.
Well, let's talk about then conservation measures, right? We've all heard about low flow toilets and water, shower heads. Are there some conservation measures that maybe people haven't heard of that are newer and maybe a little more creative?
Well, I think there are. Some of them are a little harder to do unless you're building a new house. But starting at the easiest, you know, the low flow shower heads, the low flow toilets and those sort of things. I mean, that's very easy for people to install. And so when they need to replace a toilet, you know, just go out and buy a low flow, or you could replace a shower head just for a few dollars and that sort of thing, and kitchen faucets, even outside spigots and those kind of things. So that's the easy thing to do. Some communities like Bug Scuffle up in Sacramento's, actually their well is so low a producer that they can't really use it for livestock and gardens. So most of the people in that community have like a storage tank off their roof so they could collect rainwater and use that for like gardens and livestock and that sort of thing. And actually the new state building in Ruidoso that houses the environment department has one of these systems to catch the rainwater for irrigation use. So we're thinking along those lines. And that's something easy to do. It's easy to retrofit, you know, just to collect that rainwater. There are other things that are not quite as easy that may be a little bit cutting edge here in New Mexico, and that is to reuse gray water. So not really from toilets, of course, that would not count, but from like washing machines and that sort of thing, where you can use it and divert it instead of to a septic tank out onto the lawn or something like that.
Wow.
So those are things that individuals can do. Something else that people really don't think about are just leaks within their house, because we talk about 20% water loss in the water system, you know, in the mains and distribution lines, but in people's houses, you know, most people have leaky something in their house. You know, a faucet that drips, and just a dripping faucet could be 30 gallons a day. And if you multiply that by a few hundred houses, that's a lot of water, you know, that's really provided potable to the house that receives no human use.
And how can you tell, right? Sometimes these leaks are hidden within our houses, and we don't even notice them, right? Is there a good way that...
At 2 in the morning you could hear your sink. Instead of just throwing a washcloth in there to make it shut up, you could actually, the next morning get a plumber in or just replace the little seals or something like that. Or a toilet. Toilets, if you hear them running, or sometimes, like mine for a while before I replaced it, I could hear it turn on and off, through the night. And that's a lot of water right there. And so that's something to consider too, because if you add it up, like a toilet could be like 100 gallons a day, water lost just, in a single home. So multiply that by, a few hundred homes in an area, that's a lot of water. Yeah. And then outside use too, a lot of water is used outside, and we talked about gardens, and people want their gardens.
Yeah, you were saying when it comes to a city's use of water, you were saying where does most of that water go for a city?
Well, some, I guess, half or more than half is used for outdoor use. So that's something to consider too, if you could cut down on outdoor water use, or use non-potable water for that. If you have a private well, use that. But don't connect it to your house, but just use it separately, for outdoor use. And some towns, not so much in New Mexico, but in other places, Australia is really big on this too, because I think they have to. And that is, they use all gray water for outdoor use. So the town actually has 2 lines running through it. One's potable and one is the purple pipe, it's called, that has the reused water that you can use outdoor.
You can use that for your lawn and such.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gardens, lawn, things like that.
So are there places around the state that are more difficult to outreach to, say, outlying colonias or native lands? And are do those places face different water challenges than the rest of the state?
Probably not. And I don't think outreach is very difficult anywhere. We just need to get to them. And we have a small staff, and so it's really, really tough to do. So I think that limits somewhat. And then when they receive a letter, almost any water system, unless it's something they need to deal with immediately, they're probably going to put it off and for a while. And so we really encourage that when they get a letter from me or from someone in the Environment Department, to read it and get back to us, because we are here to help. We're not here just to regulate and send violations. We are here to ensure that we have sustainable water.
Okay.
And that's my main job. So we want people to come see me.
So I understand you are planning to do some meetings out in eastern New Mexico.
Right.
Is it?
Yeah, actually we want to cover the whole state, and we had to start somewhere, and we started with the Oglala Aquifer, or the High Plains Aquifer it's called.
Tell me about that aquifer.
Oh, it's huge. It actually at one point contained more water than Lake Erie. And that's just the underground water in this one aquifer, this one rock formation. And it extends all the way from Nebraska down to Texas. And just
so we're at the very southern tip of this gigantic aquifer.
Or the eastern, the southeastern tip.
Southeastern tip.
Yeah, because a little bit of it stretches into New Mexico, and communities like Hobbs and Lovington, all the way up to Portales, Elida, Clovis, they're all on the Oglala. And it's used for so many things. Agriculture, of course, the big circles. If you ever fly an airplane, you see these circles of irrigation, where water is pumped out of the ground to water the corn and crops in that area. So, it has a lot of uses. Oil industry, of course, uses quite a bit of water when they drill and produce oil and gas. So that's another demand on this aquifer. And in some places, it's depleted over 50%. And I think New Mexico is a little bit fortunate, because maybe the way the aquifer is set, it's not quite at 50%, and it's really hard to tell where we are, but it is decreasing. And so we're out in the eastern part of the state meeting with communities just to bring them together to talk about solutions and sustainability to these water issues out there.
And I mean, what can you do if that is your source of water? Well, and it's like you say, it's like a glass of water. Yeah. You've got a bunch of straws in there, and you're sipping it out. What are alternative solutions?
Well, there are a number of things. None of them are too easy. And at first, maybe no one's going to want to do them because a lot are expensive, or they may not think they need it quite yet. But if we start now, then I think we'll have sustainability, and that's what we're trying to get the message out. And some things, well, one is reuse. And it could be everything from like what Cloudcroft's doing, which is called direct potable reuse. where they actually take water from the wastewater treatment plant and treat it further and use it as potable water again. And they're not doing this yet. They're building it still.
Okay.
And so, of course, we need to make sure that this water is safe to drink. So we're working with them to ensure they have guidelines to keep the water safe to drink. But that's at the extreme end. There are other things you can do. For instance, we were talking about the purple pipe in communities, and there are several now, and I believe Las Cruces is one, and Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Farmington, Alamogordo. They all use part of their wastewater effluent they clean it up further and then water golf courses and parks and things like that with it. But if we extend that further so that people could actually have, excuse me, this purple pipe running to each home, then when they turn on their outside spigot, it wouldn't be potable water or fresh, clean water, but it would be the reused water. That's certainly good enough for watering lawns and gardens and things.
So when it comes to an underground aquifer, is it just a matter of slowing down the pace that we're reducing the water in the glass, or is there any way to recharge?
Recharge is hard to do in a drought, and we're dependent on so many other states with the Oglala, all the way from Nebraska, on down through Kansas, part in Colorado, Oklahoma, Texas, that all draw upon this. And here we are way at the edge of it, and so we're kind of at the edge of a lot of things when that aquifer is concerned, because we have no control over the rest of the use of that same water supply.
So what does that mean? I mean, do we have to start working with our neighbors?
We do, and that's part of where we're headed too. We're meeting next month with just folks in New Mexico.
When are you meeting? And when are you meeting and where?
It's going to be in Hobbs. This is just open for the mayors and county officials and things like that at this point. We don't want to make it too big too quick, because we need to kind of plan first to figure out what we're going to do. That's on the 18th of December over in Hobbs at the New Mexico Junior College.
Okay.
And we're going to meet with folks there, but then we're going to enlarge it next year to include Texas. Because they share the aquifer, we have the same problems, and I think we'll have no problem bringing them to the table. And the agriculture industry, livestock industry, we're all sharing the same water. We all need to work on a solution. And then eventually...
has that been done before? Have you worked with Texas on water issues at the state level?
We have, not over this though. And so this will be the first time that we have something done on the Oglala Aquifer. But then open it up internationally, because Mexico is also concerned and shares the same water source as well. Not the Oglala necessarily, but the Capitan Reef, for instance, the Hueco tanks, and that through there down in Texas and into Chihuahua. So we want to include them as well at some point. But we're not doing it all at once, or else it'll be a little bit unwieldy, I think. So we're going to just expand it as we go.
Okay. And are there models that you're following, maybe that have been done in other places across the Southwest?
We're hoping to use this as a model, actually.
Yeah.
I think people are very interested and very motivated now, but only because of necessity. Where in the past it's hard to bring people together if they don't really see an imminent problem. But now there is an imminent problem, and it's hard to dismiss. So.
Right.
We're just now starting to work with other states and other entities.
And so we had some rain this year, more so than we'd seen in the past 2 or 3 years.
Right.
And can you say whether or not that's helped at all?
Oh, it certainly helped. I mean, it cut down the fires, for instance, and that was a big help, because then there's less watershed damage and that sort of thing. Overall, not much. I mean, it's going to take quite a few years to bring us back to a pre-drought level. So even though it's raining and it's great, and if there's plenty of snowpack, which hopefully there will be this year, that's great. But we need, years of that to really replenish these aquifers.
And so so you're going to do some work in eastern New Mexico in the next month. What other areas? Where is it most critical, these water supply issues?
I think the Oglala is the most critical right now, and that's why we're starting there. And we'll probably move up into the Mora Guadalupe area, in through there, including Las Vegas, which is concerned as well about water supply. So that's an area where we're going to move as soon as we can.
Okay,
So,
okay.
and eventually we'll hit the whole state. But there are programs out now where we have reached out to every small water system in the state and just alerting them to the problem and letting them know that we're here to help them.
So where can people find out information whether or not you're going to be in their area, or whether they'd like to request a meeting to strategize for better water use?
We have a website, and you could go to that, and the best one would be the Drinking Water Bureau website. And so you could go to the triple W's, and it's NMENV as in New Mexico Environment, and then there's a backslash, and then type in DWB for Drinking Water Bureau, and that'll take you to a lot of the resources and contacts for everybody on the program.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, Joe. I'd like to, I'm grateful you came on the show to talk about this very, very important issue, and I wish you luck as you travel around the state. This has been Fronteras, a Changing America desk, and I'm Mónica Ortiz Uribe. Thank you.